out with how we can overcome these barriers so that each of us will really feel close to each other. We will really begin to feel like and act as one. But first of all, what does oneness in marriage mean? Is it when your family, your family head or maybe a parent, on the day you get married, takes your hand, places your hand in the hand of the your partner, and then you're blessed? Is it when the pastor priest blesses you, your pronounced husband and wife? Is that when you are one? Well, here are a few ideas to think about. First of all, we'll look at what it doesn't mean. Oneness in marriage doesn't mean each partner loses their identity or individuality. We are indeed two different people who come together to get married. Every one of us has the opportunity to be more than we could ever be alone. Indeed, the wise teacher in the book of Ecclesiastes in the Bible says, two are better than one. They can get more for their work. So oneness is usually something that we feel, one writer says it's an intense heart opening, having the ability to share fully and completely about oneself and to welcome fully and completely one's spouse into your life. But then we also have to note that a oneness marriage, as FamilyLife.com puts it, is formed by a husband and wife who are grafting. I like to use the word weaving, trying to make one, intimacy, trust, and understanding with each other. A oneness marriage demands a lifetime process of relying on God and forging an enduring relationship, a relationship that lasts. That's what we mean, not one in which you're suffering. So let me rephrase, forging a lasting relationship according to God's design. And it is much, much more than just two people being together. It's a tender measure of body, soul, and spirit. Oneness in marriage has been compared by some to be like a pair of scissors. Two components joined, never to be separated. As we know, scissor blades frequently go in different directions, but they're most powerful when coming together. So next time you take a pair of scissors, think of oneness. They're joined, but they often go in different directions, but they work best when they come together, same direction. But becoming one flesh, again, doesn't mean you lose who you are. You don't get lost in becoming one with your spouse. We retain our individuality. I like certain foods. My wife doesn't like those foods. She likes certain foods. I don't like them. I love reading certain books. She doesn't like those books. I love certain movies. She doesn't like those movies. But we feel and we work as one. So, becoming one doesn't take away your likes and dislikes. In his book, The Best Advice I Ever Got on Marriage, Frank Pastore shares advice from his own marriage. And he says, and I quote, "While you have to work together and grow as a couple, both of you also have to grow as individuals." Dr. Minnie Claiborne, who's a counselor and life coach here in the U.S., says, quote, "It is unhealthy when either partner loses their God-given identity, personality, and individuality, because this robs the partnership of the gifts, talents, and insights that would create a healthy balance," end quote. So you see, Our differences, our gifts, abilities, talents, all we are as individuals don't get lost because we're working toward oneness. And we also have to make this point of clarification. Oneness does not mean finding complete fulfillment in your spouse. I want to repeat that. Oneness doesn't mean finding complete fulfillment in your spouse. We've heard people talk about, oh, my husband completes me, my wife completes me, so without them you are incomplete. Now, that cannot be right because every person is created complete. We would like to think it's just a figure of speech. But no, there are people who believe if they're not married, they are incomplete. And we want you, if you're thinking that way, to get that out of your mind. As part of the Becoming Soulmates seminars, authors Dr. Les and Leslie Parrott caution, if you try to build intimacy with another person, becoming whole, that is one, on your own, all your relationships become an attempt to complete yourself. This is why we're cautioning. If you're not married and you're thinking of going into marriage so you'll be complete, you're already in trouble. Because guess what? If your partner also feels they are incomplete, guess what's going to happen? Two incomplete people will not make one complete person. No. Each one of us must be complete as God made us. And we come whole, that is complete, into the relationship, not coming to look to my partner to complete me. This is important because oneness is a union of body, mind, and spirit. A union of body, mind, and spirit. So if you are incomplete, what are you bringing? Incomplete mind? This is a union of a whole person. And building this kind of oneness doesn't happen because we've been talking for a long time, or having deep discussions and as people say, really getting to know each other, or we've lived together long. No. That doesn't necessarily build oneness. Oneness, as you will hear us share, happens in the decisions, the choices, and actions that occur in the daily things of life that we do with and for one another as spouses. For starters, the Bible teaches in Genesis chapter 2, verse 24, therefore, a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. Many translations of the Bible have become one flesh, or become one. The word become there should remind us that it's a process, that it's not instant. Become also means we have to work on it. Because if it's a process that involves the two of us, then we have to cultivate it. We have to develop it. And we have to nurture this oneness in our relationship. So, what then can be the barriers to oneness? First of all, selfishness. Selfishness simply means thinking about oneself only. Here in America, there's a saying, me, myself, and I, we are enough. We don't need anyone. We like to think of it as the unholy trinity. In the Bible, the letter of James chapter 4, verse 1 declares, what causes fights and quarrels among you? Don't they come from your desires that battle within you? Friends, one characteristic that all human beings share is that we are inherently selfish. We like to think about and for ourselves. It's natural. It's the way we all survive. Our fights, especially within marriage, even among friends before marriage, primarily comes from the fact that we are self-seeking. We defend ourselves. We defend our ideas, our views. Our fights don't typically come because of money, sex, in-laws, or unmet expectations in marriage, for example. Our quarrels arise from the selfish desires that wage war inside of us and our relationship. So selfishness will hinder your oneness in every possible way, every day. That's why we started by saying the choices we make, the decisions and the actions, all either enable developing oneness with our spouse or drifting apart. Whether it is unmet expectations, the desires we have, our plans, dreams, or hopes, these reside in us. And the question to married people especially is, how much of these do we share before or even during the marriage? Often what we hear is, don't like this, I want this, and we want, and because we have all these things in us, we also expect that our spouse will help and support us to achieve these very unexpressed wishes. But how can they do so if they don't know? So remember this, expectation without expression leads to frustration. Expectation without expression leads to frustration. There are also those who expect that the spouse will focus only on fulfilling their own needs. In other words, I've told him what I would like him to do, what I want him to do. I'm expecting him to do it. Well, if the marriage were about one person, how would it work? What about the other spouse? I've sometimes heard wives saying, isn't it the duty of my husband to make me happy? And I say, no, it's not his duty. And they're disappointed. Because I ask back, well, what is your duty? Is your duty to make him happy? They haven't thought of it that way. That's selfishness. If we both consider that we will make each other happy, we're making headway. But when it is only one person's duty to make only one person happy, that cannot be a recipe for oneness. When one person feels neglected, that definitely cannot and will not promote oneness. We need to remember, each one of us, that life and the world does not revolve around us alone. The I in our thinking, vocabulary, and actions must give way to we and me. The I must give way to we, and then the me gives way to us in the marriage relationship. So that's the selfishness. Don't look out only for yourself. Look out for the interest of your spouse only. That's a major step on the road to oneness. Another barrier is the fear of intimacy. There's fear, general fear, but there's also fear of intimacy. And I'll come to the second fear later on. But there is the fear that comes from somebody getting to know who I really am. Who I really am. Adam and Eve, our first parents, went from being naked and unashamed in Genesis 2:25 to hiding in shame. Note that Genesis 2:25 follows the Bible's declaration in Genesis 2:24 that the two shall become one flesh, one. As our first parents, Adam and Eve, began to do, we also hide and cover our differences out of fear of getting caught. Some believe that if people get to know the real me, if he really gets to know, who I am, if she really gets to know these are some of my fears, my worries, they will not accept me. He will not accept me. He will look down on me. Maybe he will not even love me. There are also those who were taught to be secretive while growing up. Maybe you grew up hearing statements like, don't tell your spouse everything. And such a statement will not evaporate from your mind simply because you've got married. Actually, it will become activated because you're now married and will begin to influence your interactions and behavior toward your spouse. Others have developed the habit of being secretive because of certain negative life experiences, such as a close friend betraying their trust or leaking confidential information. Sometimes the fear of fully sharing uh, what's going on in your life may come from the experience of a spouse using shared information against you, sometimes as an insult. That's a sure way to kill oneness. There is also fear that arises from people, someone in the relationship, as we say, walking on eggshells, being so cautious that they might offend the partner or spouse. Sometimes this is because the partner is emotionally fragile. You don't know what will set him off. You don't know what will set her off. Sometimes the person is just simmering with anger. There's some people, like a friend of ours described, some people are a walking civil war. And the anger in them is not caused by their spouse. Maybe things aren't going well at work, they're taking it out on their spouse. Doesn't help. Instead of sharing what's going on so they can put their heads together and work on it, they rather take out their rage, their anger on their spouse. These unhealthy ways of relating often come from deep places of hurt, insecurity, and sometimes plain pride. And they need to be dealt with. Often, someone opening up and being honest about these feelings can be helped through counseling. Otherwise, they will not be able to develop oneness with their spouse. It's important to understand that opening up one's life to another is not easy, but it's a discipline that can yield many positive results. It is no surprise, therefore, that the prophet Amos said that two people do not walk together except they agree. Amos chapter 3, verse 3. One benefit of agreeing and walking together is that and being very open with each other for that matter, is that you will experience less and less room for suspicion or doubt. And in marriage, remember, husband and wife are to become a union, not an association. Unfortunately, we can say from the work we do that there are many couples who are living more as associates and not as a union. So friends, if you're not ready to share with your spouse, then you're not ready to become one with them. Each one of us needs to learn to do so and encourage each other to be open and intimate with each other. Then there is laziness. Some might say apathy. You just don't feel like there's anything special. Over time in marriage, we can become passive and choose not to pursue one another, what we call courting each other, making each other feel valued, special, and wanted. In many ways, this is actually a veiled form of selfishness. When we choose our own desires, and especially to follow our own desires and check out of the relationship, often without our partner even being informed. So they're there, they're doing all they can to keep the relationship going, and you have checked out. That's selfish. We can become passive in our relationship and just quit caring. But true love, on the other hand, is self giving and active. It's not lazy or apathetic. That's why we have seminars sometimes titled "Keeping Love Alive," and we've had a session sometime past, maybe one of the Valentines we did, "Keeping Love Alive." That which doesn't grow is either dying or is already dead, and you can't build oneness when one is already checking out or maybe has checked out of the relationship. Sometimes our ignorance can be a barrier to the oneness. What do we mean? Ignorance of what it means to be one, what it means to have a good marriage in which, as a couple, you are really united. Some of us got poor models of marriage growing up. And much as you might think your parents' marriage was great because you never heard them quarrel or exchange words or, anything like that, we never really got a good model of what it means to be truly united with each other. Maybe even our friends, our closest friends. Maybe you have a close friend who's got married and who's always whining and lamenting about, all the terrible things that's happening in their marriage. And you wonder, Or you have a friend who seems to be enjoying himself, and yet wife is not in the picture. Maybe that's the model you have. And that can't be a model that encourages oneness. And that's why, especially for those who are not married, we say ensure that you get premarital counseling to prepare for marriage. Or if you're already married, as most people on this program are, get equipped through marriage programs and also with a counselor to correct your mistakes, refresh your knowledge, and energize and recharge your relationship. As we often say, we don't know of any people who decided to get married to be miserable. So why don't you learn about, apply, practice what will be helpful so you can enjoy your marriage? Another barrier can be family. Yes, every one of us belongs to a family, and we are all heavily influenced by the family in which we grew up, whether from the direct teachings and instruction of our parents or by observing them and our siblings. We also learn from the extended family's cultural demands and actions. Couples can allow extended family to meddle and interfere in their lives and marriage in ways that are unhelpful. So we all hear statements such as, don't tell anyone anything about our family, or keep this within our family, usually the nuclear family. In a marriage, a person can be kept without any information about events in the spouse's family and can be made to feel like an outcast. Just consider, what message are you giving your spouse? That you are united with your family, but not with them, your spouse? How would you feel if your spouse also started planning with and keeping things relating to their family from you? The irony really is that families or persons that encourage this type of behavior become offended when they are on the receiving end of the same behavior. This is why Jesus highlights that marriage involves forming allegiance, a new allegiance to your spouse rather than your parents. In the Gospel of Mark, chapter 10, verses 7 to 9, this is what Jesus says. Mark chapter 10, verses 7 to 9.
Mark chapter 10, verses 7 to 9. For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no one separate.
Thank you. See, our actions can cause us to separate. No, I'm not talking about, you leave your parting company, going separate ways. No, but we can be living separate lives under one roof. That's what I'm talking about. And Jesus' warning is that we should not work towards that. The next barrier we'll look at is children. And it's all children are family, but they are a specialized category. So let's talk about children. How can they be a barrier to our oneness as husband and wife? Well, disagreements on how children should be brought up can divide couples. So you have father, this is how he's raising the children. Mother, this is how he's raising her. She's raising her children. They begin now to fight over the products of their union. How sad. It's worse when parents even pick favorites among the children. And additionally, couples can allow their children to prevent them from having time together. Some people build their lives around their children to the end that they themselves, husband and wife, have no time for each other. Nothing like going out, by themselves, no occasional getaway. For some couples, it even affects their sexual intimacy because the children also take over their bedroom. While it may seem loving, and we don't know what kind of love it is, because some people say, I want my children to feel like I love them, It's actually more loving. And research points this out. It's actually more loving to give our children a mother and a father who are united and passionate about each other. It's positive for the children. Have you tried to kiss in front of your children or to hug in front of your children? What do they say? Oh, stop that. If they're teenagers, they begin to look away. Ask them what they think about it. They love it. And it makes them feel secure. Research shows that when children see parents that way, yes, like we feel good about ourselves, they also feel good about themselves to see their parents that way. As parents, let's remember that without us, there would be no children. More importantly, after the children have left home, we will be together. How will we then relate to each other at that time if we have not developed any closeness with each other? And then there is the issue of finances, which can be a barrier to our oneness. Well, money by itself is not the barrier. It's our attitude to money or the lack of it. When we don't have the same, we don't have agreement on how we're going to earn, spend, save, invest, give, all those issues relating to money, it can easily run into problems and it can easily divide us. So as a couple, we need to learn to talk about money without it ending in a fight. And yes, you do know that it is not the absence of money that brings a fight. Sometimes it is the more money that we fight over, not because we don't have. We also need to avoid keeping secrets about money. See, if you are hiding money, using a secret credit card, or using money in ways that you would be embarrassed that for your spouse to know, it's time to come clean and move toward oneness. In fact, in our work over the years, more couples have grown closer together when they have been more open and transparent with each other about their finances. You know, popular culture tells, no, 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 don't let him know. Don't let her know. No, you are an independent. You only, yeah. But let me ask you, why would you be so willing to share your body with your spouse, but not how much you make? That tells me the value you place on your body. Money is more important to you than even your own body. Sad. Life can get so routine for some that couples can drift into boredom, thinking they have learned all there is to know about each other. This has to do with familiarity. I was talking with a couple. One had been away on a posting and had come back after a number of years. And teasing them, I was telling the lady, "Oh, this is so good. You've come home. I'm sure my brother, meaning her husband, is so happy now. You know that you guys are together." She says, "Oh, there's nothing really. There's nothing to celebrate. We are now like brother and sister." And I said, that's we can't accept that. No, you know, couples who experience oneness keep learning new things and keep courting, pursuing each other with passion and interest. Put some sizzle into your relationship. It will draw you closer. Stop this same old to work and back weekend, Saturday, this is what we do. Sunday, maybe you go to church and back, you know, same old routine. It's a boring life. There is more to life than that. Think of how you were before you got married. Where has all of that gone? Those were the things that drew you close together. Are you surprised that you feel a little more distant from each other? For some, tiredness can be a barrier. You're wondering, tiredness? Yes. That's because some people take on much more than they can handle. The extra shift, the second job, maybe a third job. At the end of the day, maybe night, you're fatigued. And it's hard to have any emotional energy left to share with your spouse, especially in having long conversations. You begin talking, you're dozing off. He begins talking, he's dozing off, and you wonder. Research by the Better Sleep Council, Better Sleep, Sleeping Better, Better Sleep Council here in the U.S. says that many people are so tired that they would rather get a good night's sleep than have sex. Friends, we need to start saying no to running ourselves so tired that we don't have any energy left to give to each other in our marriage. How about fault finding? Fault finding. And I'll take this together with finger pointing. They're not the same thing, but fault finding and finger pointing. Andy Stanley, a leadership author, speaker, and pastor, has said that when there's a gap between what we expect and what we experience, we choose to fill the gap with either trust or suspicion. One of the surest ways to obstruct oneness in marriage is to continually one of the surest ways to obstruct oneness in your marriage is to continually suspiciously find fault with your spouse. Who wants to live under a cloud of accusation all the time. He goes out, where did you go? And who I, you know, you, how will such a person draw closer to you? She talks to someone, no, you can't talk to this person on the phone. I want to hear what you are saying. Hello, how can this person want to draw close to you? And this is linked to finger pointing. See, couples that constantly point fingers at each other in blame do not experience oneness. It can be very easy and convenient to blame one another for problems in a relationship. But we need to consider how such behavior pushes a spouse away from us rather than drawing them close. We need to consider how our behaviors of pointing fingers, accusing, blaming them for problems within the relationship, how such behavior pushes a spouse away rather than drawing them close. Unhealthy marriages function like a game where there's a winner and loser, but healthy couples see themselves as on the same team. Each person takes ownership for their own faults, and then together they work to bless each other than to blame each other. And how about our friends? They can have a pull and exert influence over each one of us as spouses. We do acknowledge that a person may have had very close friends for many years before they marry. But does that make it okay to continue spending so much, if not all your free time with your friends? How will you develop oneness with your spouse when the time and energy that could go into it is devoted to other people? You're willing to help everybody else except your spouse. When they ask you to do something, you are annoyed. But somebody calls and you're gone. Maybe you did that this weekend. Remember that every free minute spent with someone else is potentially time spent away from your spouse. Also, if you consult, develop, and discuss plans with your friends rather than your spouse, would you also like to find out, for example, about what business your spouse has created or owned from other people? We all need friends, yes. But when our relationship with them threatens the oneness between us and our spouses, we have to make a choice. Let me help you for your spouse. And then there are our hobbies too. Yes, there are hobbies. You like to watch the game, I love to watch the game too. But because hobbies, not just watching sports, because hobbies involve time away from our spouses, hobbies can create problems about oneness. And usually, this may arouse out of resentment by the spouse that feels neglected. Football, American football game, 3 hours. Something else, 2 hours. Out with the boys, stuff like that. All those take time. It's up to us to know that whatever action we're taking will affect our oneness with our spouse. Some of you have been wondering, what about social media? I didn't forget social media. For some, the barrier to oneness may be due to the fact that the spouse spends too much time on social media, especially communicating with others. And we should also mention that some people are so influenced by what they see or read on social media that they pattern their lives after what the influencers, as they're called, the influencers say they do or recommend, whether it's dressing, eating, exercising. In fact, a whole lifestyle can be developed simply by following an influencer, cutting out cooperation with your spouse. Beware, oneness is not developed in that way. And the last barrier we'll look at is our general struggles in life. Struggles in life. Sometimes We're just going through difficult times. We don't even understand why. It's not money. It's not the job. You know, it's just your personal life. Some struggles may be personal in the life of an individual, and sometimes jointly experienced by both spouses. Diseases such as depression can be a problem to oneness because when you're depressed, you do not feel like bonding with other people. Sometimes it may be disappointment. Sometimes it may be disagreements over all kinds of things. And all these can tear a couple apart. But they can also provide opportunities to sacrifice for the common good, to rely on God and one another. And often, that's when we can show that we truly love our spouse and that the decisions and actions we take show that we care and therefore can draw us closer so we can bond even more than before. So, what can we do to remove the barriers and develop oneness? First of all, understand that oneness is essential for an enjoyable marriage. Oneness is essential for an enjoyable marriage. The Bible teaches that right from the beginning, God intended that husband and wife should be together as one. Genesis 2, verse 18 records that God said, "It is not good for the man to be alone. I will make a helper suitable for him." This means having each other as companions. So you cannot keep things from each other and expect that all will be well with your companionship. Second, unity in marriage is a choice we have to make every day. Unity in marriage is a choice we have to make every day. Whether it is spending time with friends at weekends, happy hour at work, after work with our colleagues, watching or playing sports, working extra hours, taking on a new job, or accepting some responsibility in the community, we need to consider how this will affect our spouse. More importantly, we need to discuss and find common ground on how to handle these things I have mentioned. And when we do so, it will help us to decide when the opportunity occurs. We would recommend doing the same, discussing and finding common ground for issues such as how to bring up children. Third, learn to deal with issues together. Learn to deal with issues together. Some are quick to go outside the relationship and talk to somebody else about things that are happening between them, a conflict, some disagreement. Sometimes it's not a negative um, occurrence. Maybe it's even an investment. We want to buy a new car, and you're talking with somebody else except me, even choosing the color of the car to buy. Don't I have a say as a spouse? So, to help us deal with issues together, we need to develop a we, W-E, and us mindset, moving away from I and me. You see, it's not the absence of challenges that lead couples to have a satisfying and long-lasting marriage. It is their approach to addressing their challenges as they strive for oneness. The Apostle Paul writes in his letter to the Romans chapter 12, verse 2. Romans chapter 12, verse 2.
Romans chapter 12, verse 2. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will.
Amen. Thank you so much. Don't conform to the pattern of this world. Don't let the social media influences tell you what to do. Don't be squeezed in by what your culture says. Allow God to renew your mind. Every one of us can learn something new and to do things differently and more positively than we have been doing. And next, seek wise counsel. Seek wise counsel. Sometimes, as a couple, you might not be able to make much headway, or each of you might have such entrenched positions or views on a particular issue. Seek the help of a counselor, because, particularly from a counselor, a couple can learn and practice strategies that will enable them to work through difficult times, challenges, and issues. And I have to say this also. It is not enough to learn or to hear about these things. It is even more important to practice them, because learning about what you can do and not doing it sometimes can make things even worse in the relationship. And our last but one point is this: pray together, worship together. Pray together, worship together. Religion and spirituality provide teaching to assist couples with commitment, their capability to accept adversity, develop stability, and a sense of family unity. There's a large body of research studies that emphasize the role of religion in marital stability. Several studies that say couples that share the same faith or couples that actively practice their faith often have a more stable marriage. They often grow closer together. Friends, there are times, I'm sure if you're married, you've gone through this sometime. There are times when one realizes the need for supernatural intervention. You've tried all kinds of things, they're not working. That's when we find that praying together on the issue can be both comforting and confidence building. Jesus said, as recorded in Matthew chapter 18, verses 18 and 19. Matthew chapter 18, verses 18 and 19.
Matthew chapter 18, verses 18 and 19. Truly, I tell you, whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. Again, truly, I tell you that if two of you on earth agree about anything they ask for, it will be done for them by my Father in heaven. Amen.
Amen. So there you have it. These are Jesus' own words. If any two of you, and we believe that the most powerful two that there can be in this world is husband and wife, who are also joined together as one in marriage. The most powerful unit that there can be. And Jesus said, you agree as such a unit, your prayers will find their answers ready, coming from heaven. And last point, find activities that you can do together. Find activities that you can do together. Yes, we may have our own hobbies, interests, etc. But as husband and wife, it does help that you do also find something that you can do together. There's so many. Walking, playing. Yes, playing together. Some of us have forgotten how to play together. Some don't even know how to tease each other or even share jokes anymore. It's all part of building that oneness, that closeness, that in joke that your kids don't even get. Those are the things that make us feel one. Traveling together. Yes, travel together. Go see some place you haven't seen. Enjoy those sights alone. Cooking. Yes, cooking together. Simply put, being together and sharing experiences has a way of enabling us to bond. And here's our conclusion. As with everything that has quality, we need to take time to develop oneness. The truth is that in marriage, cultivating and strengthening oneness is lifelong, not something we do once or occasionally, not something that occurs because the priest or pastor has blessed you, not something we do on an anniversary. Developing oneness requires ongoing and wholehearted commitment from each spouse. We must have the mindset that we are in this together and will work together with each other. As we say in the vows, till death us do part. So, invest in your marriage now. It will yield great dividends for the rest of your life. Thank you so much. God bless you. And we hand over to Dr. Samuel Jacobs Abbey for question time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Uncle Richard, for that powerful presentation on the topic barriers to overcome in marriages. A couple of questions have come in, and almost everyone seems to agree and appreciate the content that you just shared. So, folks, this is time for us to ask questions, and we are taking questions from around the world. Uh, if you are comfortable to speak directly and you are on the conference line, you are welcome to unmute yourself and then you will ask your question directly. If not, I will also be very glad to receive your questions in the form of a text form or a WhatsApp form, and then I will be able to, as it were, read that on your behalf. So you can go ahead and send your question through country code +1 571 337 9185, and then I will do that on your behalf. All right, so let's go with the first question. Uh, uh, Good evening, and this question is coming from Cameroon, and he says that, good evening. Thank you so much for sharing this knowledge with us. My question to you is that how is it possible that two people who beautifully get married and make noise all over town, within a year or two or three, suddenly the friendship is gone? What are some of the key factors that leads to the loss of friendship in relationship? Thank you.
Thank you. You want to try? Well, let me begin. Vivian will continue. Well, first of all, I think this is one of the reasons for this discussion we're having. There is so much that can attract us and make us want to have somebody as a spouse. There are many things that attract us. Some say, oh, the beauty. Some say, oh, something about their behavior. All kinds of issues or things that can attract us. But when we begin to live together as husband and wife, you see the close quarters, that being that close to someone helps you to see things you didn't see before. Now, what it means, some you may like, some you may not like. But what do you do about it? Yes, some couples begin to work through those things they may not like. But for others, those very differences begin to tear them apart. And that's where we need to be even more alert, because we also know, because of the work we do, that the very things that sometimes attract us and lead us to get married can be a source of division. Very often we say opposites attract. The quiet person, so to speak, the introvert marries an extrovert, the bubbly person. Then they begin to live together. The bubbly person is still the bubbly person. Remember, we said you don't lose your identity in becoming one. But then what happens? The quiet person begins, be, at some point, begins to think, can't you just stop talking? Guess what? The bubbly person also begins to wonder, why are you always there just boom like that? Come on, show some excitement. I'm wearing a new dress. Come on, tell me something. And say, well, it looks okay. Is that all? Those are the things that make us, when we dwell on those things, they begin to weaken the relationship. And what we need to do is to understand the individual will be that individual. But then we need to begin to respond to each other and begin to understand, oh, this is how she is. Okay, if because she's bubbly, she wants to hear, you know, something about what she's wearing. How much does it take for me to tell my wife, oh, you look good in that dress? Or, no, you should change that one. You know, that's all they're looking for. And we need to do it for each other. But remember, one of our points is that sometimes we can become lazy and stop courting each other, stop working to improve ourselves. Just think of what happens before people get married. You're going to meet. What do? You're thinking of how well you're dressed. You're checking your hair. Yeah, men do it too. So don't say it's the women. Men too. They're checking their hair. They're checking how they look. We all before we meet. What happens after we get married? Do we still work at looking good for each other? See what I'm saying? Okay, let me hand over to Vivian.
Well, it can be selfishness because all we are looking for is what I want in the marriage, and I'm not thinking of the other person. And some people have reasons why they get married. If your reason all you want is to get married and that's it, you don't work towards the improvement of the marriage. That is what brings the problem. Some people get married and they are just relaxed. Maybe they were dressing up very nicely for the fiancé to see, and then when they get married, they don't dress up anymore. They don't do anything about, when they're going out, they don't care how they dress and all that. Meanwhile, before, they were dressing good, and that's what attracted the person. So all those things happen. Mainly, it is our selfishness and laziness. That is what causes the problems why we so relax and we don't care anymore.
Thank you. So, friendship doesn't stop with marriage. We need to continue growing it, or it's going to die. Yes, that was why you asked the question. Thank you. Continue doing the things that kept your love growing till you thought, I want to be married to this person. Don't stop because you got married. If you have stopped, pick it up again. You will see the positive difference it will make to your relationship. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, Uncle Richard, this person also just sent a follow up on that. So, I'll quickly tie it to it before I go to the next question. So, this person says that, and it's coming from Cameroon, I believe it's a woman, because she said that, but isn't it also that the earlier stages of our marriage is probably just the two of us, but as we kept growing in the marriage, children comes in and work comes in, and all that takes away from us as well. How will you advise both career couples with children and how to be able to rekindle the fire in the relationship?
Thank you very much. We did cover this in our presentation, so let me um, highlight one key point. Don't stop courting each other. How do you do that? Make time for each other. Yes, we're developing our careers, the children. How are we able to do all that? Because we make the time for it. So why don't you schedule some time for each other as well? Check your calendars. If you are a professional, you are a doctor, you are a lawyer, you are a carpenter, whatever work you do, people come to see you, they need your time. How do you get them to see you? Or how do they get to see you? They fill out some requests, yeah? Okay, so why don't you carve out time for each other? Friends, it's basically what it is. Make some time for each other, then you can put what you desire into that time. If you don't make the time, it will not happen. And yes, we did cover children. Yep. For some people, children become their lives. And so when the children go, they don't know how to relate to each other. That's why when you see the graphs for divorces, it spikes within the first 2 3 years when people are getting to know the real persons, you know, drops off, children start coming, and then begins to rise after year 18, 19. Yep, you guess right. The children have started going away to uni. They're going to college, they're going to university. Suddenly, parents, spouses, they don't know each other. The glue that kept them together is gone. And so let's make time for each other. Vivian and I tell our girls, we're going out. They say, where are you going? So we're going out. We let them know that we need to have that time for each other. It's healthy for our children to know. And yes, we can find people to babysit and help us. If you can't find anybody, you can build even time around it. Children don't have to be around us all the time. And we have covered things like what? Make time for each other. That's all it means. Make that time. We are able to do the things we do because we allocate time to those things. Same way we can allocate some time to each other. 1 hour, you can do it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Uncle Richard. So our next question here comes from the U.S. and it says that how does one overcome selfishness?
Very good question.
You make up your mind. Don't think about yourself alone all the time. You have to make up your mind to think of the other person also. Selfishness is natural to everybody. Everybody thinks about himself or herself. But you have to make up your mind to think of the other person. If I feel this way, how does my husband feel about it? If I am thinking of it this way, how is my wife thinking about it? How will she take it? However, it's good for me, but is it good for my husband also? It's good for me. Is it good for my wife also? How about that? Whatever I'm doing, if I think of the other person, if you think of your wife, you think of your husband, it takes out selfishness. It takes away a lot. In Philippians chapter 2, verses 3 and 4. Philippians chapter 2, verse 3 and 4 in the New Living Translation says, don't be selfish. Don't try to impress others. Be humble, thinking of yourself, thinking of others better than yourself. Don't look out only for your own interests, but take an interest in others too. You see, if you don't look out for your own interests alone, but look for the interest of your spouse too, it takes out selfishness. So whatever you are doing, it is not you alone. We are in this house together. So I cannot do things that I like alone. It has to be something that, how about my husband? How about my wife? How do they like this? How do they not like it? So when we think of that, when we are not thinking of ourselves alone, it takes out the selfishness. And as I always say, the selfishness is natural to us. So you really have to work towards it, the selflessness. You have to make an effort. Otherwise, you will continue to be selfish. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Auntie Vivian, for the clarification. Another question here, and this question is coming from Ghana. And it says that, thank you very much. Uh, I joined in the middle of the presentation. I think I overheard Mr. Crab talk a little about culture and how it impacts our relationship and friendship. I may have missed, I better have to go back and listen to the audio again. But please, my question is, can culture or our upbringing affect our relationship, especially I in particular grew up in a culture where women are considered a second class people. And so that tendency of disrespecting women or my wife ought to serve me has always been part of my lifestyle. Is it something that needs to be reviewed, or we cannot change culture? Thank you.
You decide what you want to do. From what you are saying, you already know that it's not right. So why are you doing it? It's still part of the selfishness. You like your wife to serve you. You don't do anything because women are supposed to serve. You like it, and you are blaming culture. Yes, culture has a lot of influence on us if we want it that way. But we can renew our minds. That's what Romans 12:2 tells us. To renew we should be transformed by the renewing of our minds. So don't blame culture. Yes, culture can influence you, but you can grow and do better. You know that, yes, you grew up in a culture that doesn't respect women. So you are sitting down, the woman is doing all the work, and, like when they used to go to the farm, the man is carrying only the cutlass or the gun behind. The woman is carrying a baby at her back, carrying all the load, and they are walking home. They get home. The man goes to sit in a lazy chair, and the woman goes to cook, does everything. And do you think that is a good thing? Think about it yourself, and don't blame culture. You have to renew your mind and grow. Yes, culture can influence, but you have to renew your mind. Know that this is not working that way. It's not good for us, and you can change. And you can change and respect your wife.
Thank you so much. Let me quickly add, I was going to just ask a question, but I'll add a bit more. What really is culture? Culture is a set of practices, that involves some traditions. It involves the way of life of people. Have you also heard that culture is dynamic, that it does change? If culture involves the way of life of people, I have a few questions for those who say, oh, me, I'm going with culture. It was the way of life, i.e., culture, of my grandmother to cook with firewood, to have to go cut firewood, come home, make a fire before she would cook. Should my wife do the same thing today? It used to be that our way of life, my grandparents' way of life, great-grandparents, was walking wherever they were going. They didn't even have donkeys or horses. So should I also be walking from where I live to where I work, as they did from home to farm? Or should I go with the prevailing culture and drive in a car. Friends, sometimes we use or we hide behind culture to promote and perpetuate practices that benefit us. But if we are true to the definition and meaning of culture, there is a lot that we will change and not simply want to live like 100 years ago. I rest my case. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Uncle Richard. Uh, so before we go to our next question, I want to also take this opportunity to bring to all of our listeners that you could agree with me that Mr. and Mrs. Crab have, over the years, I mean, this program has been going on for such a long time, if I may recall. Even before it came on Be Inspired, it's been, I mean, well, almost 10, 17 years plus with the DC line, and this has been continuing until recently. We have some few fundraising needs that we also want to chip in, that our service providers needed us to renew our subscription so that we'll be able to bring this program live to most of you across the globe. And so if you can support us in any way, shape, or form, we are trying to raise about $500 or so to support our subscription and to extend it. I'll come back to talk more about it, but this is just to appeal to all of our listeners. If you want to keep hearing us and reaching out to a lot of people, and you know this work, it's more of a free service that Mr. and Mrs. Crab offers because they want to reach out. It's a ministry to bless more marriages. But we also want to appeal to anyone. We are raising $500 to support our subscription, so we'll be able to sustain the work. If you are touched to be a blessing to us, you can Zelle us 571-337-9185. You can cash up us the same number, 571-337-9185. And we will be glad to announce as well of your support. God bless you. Let's go to the next question here, and then we will come back to talk more about it. So the question here is also coming from the US, and it says, how can couples who live apart promote oneness? How can couple who lives apart promote oneness? Thank you.
By sharing with each other all the time. If you are far away from each other in different countries, you talk every day, or you should talk every day. So you share whatever is happening in your life. Yes, you are far away, but I have this program, I'm going here, I'm doing this, and you are sharing. That's how you get to know what is happening in each other's life. So you are far apart, but you know what is happening all the time. So if anybody calls you, even at any time, you know that, oh, yes, Joyce is at this place at this time. Richard is doing this and that at this time. You share. You talk about everything. You discuss. Whoever the children are with, you are talking with each other. You are discussing, and you share everything, so you are contributing to everything, so you know what is happening in each other's lives. That is how you do it, sharing, talking, not once in a while. Especially if you are with each other, you see each other most of the day. If you are not with each other, the only thing you can do is talk. And now there are many things, there is FaceTime, there is WhatsApp video, you can even talk and see each other. So you can work on your oneness that we share with each other all the time.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Another question here, and this is coming from Sierra Leone. It says, Do you ascribe to the assertion that people can be boring living with someone for a long time, or seeing the person all the time can be boring? Don't you also think that sometimes it's better to stay away from each other a bit in order to spice your relationship? Thank you.
It can never be boring
Could be.
if you work at it.
Okay.
You see, if it is in your mind that it will be boring, it will be boring. You have friends. Why is life not boring with your friends? You see your friends every day. You want to be with the boys. You want to be with the girls. But life is boring with your wife or your husband at home. Why is that? Because you are not working at it. You are not doing anything. You have allowed things to be like that. Same old, same old. You come home and you just sit and watch TV, and your wife does all the work. So life will be boring. Part of the life not being boring is to come home and also come and help with what your wife is doing. Then life will not be boring. Share with each other. Do things with each other. When one is going grocery shopping, do you go with each other? What do you do? When the other is doing all the work at home. One guy said all he wanted was that when he's mowing the lawn, his wife should just stand there and even if she doesn't stand there all the time, she should come outside once in a while and see what he's doing. That's all he wants to, the wife to do. And life will not be boring. So if you tell yourself that it will be boring, it will be boring. But if you decide that you will do things together, you will work together with each other, life will never be boring. When you are sharing all the time, telling each other what is happening in each other's life, doing things together, not allowing one person to do everything, life will never be boring. So you keep it in your mind, practice it and see. Life will never be boring if you don't want it to be boring, because you will find things to do. Think of how you go with your friends. All that you do with your friends, why can't you do that with your wife or your husband? That is why life will be boring. If you make the effort, life will never be boring. We have been married, this December will be 40 years. Life is never boring in this house with my husband.
I think we did share some ideas already on things you can do together. If you are doing things together, how can it become boring? You are active. And we've already said sometimes our laziness gets in the way. That's why things become boring. Boring is nothing happening, or what is happening doesn't really move you. So this is why we cultivate different interests, and we take an interest in what the other person is involved in, so that we can enrich our lives also. We learn to do different things that activates our minds and keeps us, active, not just being there and being babysat or being comforted or fanned by the television or the radio or whatever the case might be. We need to keep our minds and bodies active. Just think, before you got married, if you had a boring relationship, would you have got married? The kind of relationship you have now as a married couple, if you had that kind of relationship before marriage, would you have got married? This is why we need to rekindle the relationship, the love, the caring, the sharing, and the thoughtfulness, the things that make us feel valued, special, and wanted. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Uncle
May I
Richie.
make a small input?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. I think it's high time married couples realize that the idea that a couple gets married and lives happily thereafter is a big myth because marriage requires a lot of work. Proverbs 26:20a says, "Without wood, the fire goes out." So after the dating and you're on cloud nine, you come down to the ground level and you think things will continue as they were on their own, you are deceiving yourself. I always encourage married couples to not to forget the things that they used to do when they were dating. And as the last speaker just said, if you had a boring dating relationship, the marriage wouldn't have happened. And so things that you used to do that kept your interest in each other burning like fire should not be thrown away, but you should invest time and energy into keeping the relationship alive. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
God
so
bless
much.
you.
Awesome. Thank you very much for the contribution. And once again, all of you, you can always unmute yourself if you're on the line to ask the question. Otherwise, we can also take the question through the WhatsApp line or the email 571 and we'll gladly read the questions for you. Again, we are still taking advantage of this program to appeal for funds to support this work. We are raising an amount of $500 to support our subscription through the service provider. So if you are capable of supporting us in any way, shape, or form, +1 571 and that's for both Zelle and for Cash App. Thank you. The next question I have here says that uh, when becoming one, so when becoming one is when becoming one, when is it too much or drawing the line between your parents and your spouse? I don't know if you understood the question, Mr. Crab.
We'll try. And if the person is on still, they can clarify if we miss what they're saying. So the question is, when is, again?
So he said, when is becoming one? I think it means to say, when becoming one, when is it too much
Yes.
to draw the line between your parents and your spouse?
In other words, at what point do you draw the line?
Absolutely.
Well, let's go to the beginning. We did mention Genesis 2:24. Let's use what the Bible says, as a foundation for this. The man leaves his father and mother, is joined to his wife, and the two become one flesh. For those who are culturally inclined, it is expected that the two people will begin a life together. It's rare, almost non-existent, to hear that a husband or a man marries a woman and then takes her to go and live in his father's house. There's a question mark on that. That leaving involves not only the social leaving, but also leaving parents. In other words, actually physically leaving. And then it also involves leaving psychologically. In other words, you show to either set of parents that you are capable of taking your own decisions. You are capable of taking your own decisions. You see, if you enter into marriage, the process itself tells people you are mature. That's why below a certain age, generally speaking, marriages are discouraged. That you have to be a certain age before you're married. That's why we're all up in arms against child marriages, you see? And a certain level of maturity is required. So if a certain level of maturity is required, why keep going back to your parents, either set of parents? You want to take any major decision, you're going there. You know, you want to you want to build a house, you're going to ask them, or you even want to buy the land on which to build a house, you're going to ask first. You want to what? That doesn't show you're mature. And every married couple need to take concrete steps that their home does not become an extension of their parents' home. And by the way, two of us came from different homes. So if I want my home to be an extension of my parents' home, for that matter, and my wife wants our home to be an extension of her parents' home, do you see the confusion that will arise? That's why some of you might be unhappy in your marriages, because you're trying to run your home like it was your parents' home. And you're not your parents, by the way. Show that you're mature. Show that you can take your own decisions. Let your parents disagree with you and be ready to defend the action, the decision you've taken with your spouse. Don't go taking decisions, making plans with your folks, and then you come tell them to your spouse and you try to force them or convince them to accept what you've already decided. The person also has their own ideas. And in any case, you didn't marry your people. So why do you keep going back to them on issues relating to your marriage? For them to decide what should be happening to your marriage. You're telling them you are immature. And in culture after culture, in ethnic group after ethnic group, all around the world, we read, we hear the proverbs that say marriage is for the mature. Show by your actions, your decisions, your practices that you are psychologically independent, financially independent, socially independent. Yes, I'm not talking about neglect, but show that you and your spouse can stand on your own. Yes, we will retain our social relationships. We will show respect towards parents, but our decision is our decision. If you and your spouse decide on something and you go discuss with your folks and you begin efforts to dismantle that decision, you're not ready for marriage. And you are undermining oneness with your spouse and also the trust that should exist between the two of you. Nowhere does it say a man will leave his father and mother, be joined to his wife, and they will have a marriage like their parents. No culture says that. Yes, there are things we imitate. There are things we borrow from either set of parents. But we, as a couple, should have our own plans, views, ideals, vision for our own marriage, if you like. We should be able to make up our own minds and decisions. You see, if you don't, this is why sometimes you might have an endless argument or disagreement about an issue because either one or both of you will be actively flying the family flag. I'm talking of the families you came from, rather than your own couple family flag. It's a big difference, and it shows you're standing together with your spouse. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, make a
Yes, go ahead.
yeah, make a quick
Yes, sir.
a quick comment? I think the other side of the coin is for parents to also realize that they are at best a support system to their children who have gotten married, and not an intrusive element in the relationship. And so they should do their best not to insert themselves into the relationship. As a married person, yes, you leave your parents, but it doesn't mean you throw them away. You still obey the commandment to honor your parents. And there are ways to do that. You check upon them and, you call them, wish them well. If they need anything, you may be able to extend a helping hand after discussions with your spouse so that you are both on the same page that either her parent or your parent needs some help with something, and then you kind of do it together. All right? Thank you.
Thank
Excellent.
you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
But
Thank you for
we're getting real wisdom in the contributions. God
absolutely,
bless you.
absolutely. Thank you very much. So the one who asked a question put in a clarification, but I think you've already addressed that because it was making a reference to what to share with your family and what not to share with your family. Uh, so that because said the example about what to share uh, and what information you should not share. But I think your response captured that. So we will move forward to other questions that have also come in. Um, there's another question here, and I believe it's also coming from the US. And the question here says that how does one promote individuality in the marriage, and how does one deals with a spouse who doesn't necessarily like that idea?
Well, we're already individuals. We all have our likes and dislikes. We can have a situation where one person doesn't even allow the other one, the spouse, any breathing room, so to speak. And they're talking of love. And, we know about situations where, the, a husband will not allow the wife to go anywhere alone because he wants them to be together. It's not love. It is policing. It is not
It's
even protecting.
insecurity.
You know, and the people who they don't want to do anything by themselves. Come on, before you get married, or before you got married, you had a life, you had interests, you had friends. What happened? Getting married doesn't mean you cut them all out. Like our contributor so wisely said, parents, we don't cut them, we don't throw them away. Siblings, we have relationships. So what do? You suddenly don't relate to anybody else except your spouse? No, that's unreal. And it's unrealistic also and unhealthy, you know. And actually, we didn't go into it, but there are research studies that say when couples have their own individual interests, they pursue individual interests, it helps to enrich their relationship. How? When they share about those interests. You see, we all don't have to belong to the same, for example, we all don't have to have the same hobby, but maybe she belongs to some a group that perhaps helps run a soup kitchen. He also belongs to a group that is helping to mentor young boys, for example, maybe in science or in the arts, the theater or something like that. They have different interests. They can share what's going on. It enriches their lives. but it also helps them to develop their individuality. We have to emphasize oneness doesn't mean you disappear as a person. No, you don't. You will be the person you are. And if you find yourself in a situation where your your individuality is being destroyed, or you feel you can't be yourself, it's time you had a serious talk with your spouse if they are the cause. And if they're not, maybe you should be talking to a counselor to help you. Actually, not maybe. You should be talking to a counselor to help you. It's very important, you know. Let's not think that, oh, without my husband, I am a nobody. Without my wife, I'm a nobody. You were a somebody before, and you are a somebody in your marriage, you know. Remember what we said? We come into a marriage as two whole and complete persons. We don't come incomplete and expect that our marriage will make us, you know, a complete person. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Scrap, for that. Uh, Another question coming from Zimbabwe. And it says that, good afternoon. Uh, my question to you is, in terms of togetherness, if you are the quiet type and your spouse is a louder type, and sometimes you just want to have peace of mind, and yet he's still talking and trying to change you to become like him. How do you manage that so that it doesn't generate a lot of conflict at home? Thank you.
Understanding. Understanding each other. You know, this is a good example of ourselves, Richard and I. I used to be the quiet one who doesn't talk.
You still are.
Well, no, I'm better now. And he talks. We just have to understand that sometimes I allow him to talk and I listen. He says I'm a good listener. I listen. You know, sometimes there are things that he said it like twice already. I don't even tell him you've told me already. He wants to talk, so I let him talk. And then he also realizes sometimes when he sees that I'm so quiet, you know, just looking at him and he's talking, am I disturbing you? I'm talking too much, right? Sometimes I say, yeah, I'd like to, you know, do this or that. Or sometimes I say, just go ahead. It's okay. I'm listening. And sometimes when I am also too quiet, he lets me know that you've been too quiet, you know.
The house can't be quiet just like that.
Exactly. So we work together. It's understanding that you know that your partner is a quiet person. So you allow sometimes, let them be the quiet that they want to be. And then you know that your partner is also the bubbly, talkative one. Allow them. Those are the very things that attracted you together. You see, the quiet person. In fact, one of the things that attracted me to Richard is his sense of humor. He makes you laugh. You know, I used to be a very moody person, always thinking of something in my mind, but he always says something to make you laugh. But sometimes, you know, that same thing can be annoying. I feel that I'm very serious right now. I'm not joking. You know, and he also says, what shows you that I am joking? You know, but I have to learn, you know, and accept it that way. And somehow God has given me children who are also very jovial the same way, you know, and sometimes they really, you know, mess me up, you know. They all plot against me, you know.
When she's too quiet.
But it's fine. You know, you learn from each other. As we learn in science, Like poles repel, unlike poles attract. That is the same thing that attracted you together. One quiet, one bubbly. They can bring problems that you can work around it. When you are not, that's why I'm talking about the selfishness. If you are not selfish, you will think about the other person also and accommodate. And you can work together and life will be wonderful.
Thank
Awesome.
you.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Another question here, and this question is coming from Nepal. I think it's already morning in Nepal. And this question says that uh, how do you deal with a wife who questions everything? You know, sometimes men have internal ego, and we don't necessarily have to answer every question. But how do you deal with a spouse who always want to ask you a question in order for you to answer? Does that mean that she's demanding an approval of you, or as a man, can't I make decisions independently? Thank you.
You see, you are thinking that it is women who ask questions. It's the other way in this house. It is my husband who asks the questions all the time. But I have learned to give simple answers. Sometimes it can be irritating. You know, why are you asking questions? He just wants to know. So if your wife is asking, she just wants to know, give her simple answers. Whatever she asks for, give her the answer, and life goes on. You know, they just want to know. There are people like that. My husband wants to know everything. So everything he's asking the question. You know, you are doing something, he's saying, what are you doing? And sometimes I'm wondering, why can't you see what I'm doing? But I've learned to give the simple answer. You know, same with my children. When you are doing something, they can see what you are doing. They ask the question, you still give the answer. Simple. You know, like, Mommy, what are you doing? Washing dishes. You can see me that I'm. The real thing is that they are wondering why you are doing the dishes, because they should have done it and you are doing it. So what are you doing? You give the answer. I am washing dishes. And then they can ask the next question. You see, learn to give simple answers when questions are asked. Your wife, your husband wants to know what you are doing. Whichever way it comes, just learn to give simple answers. It will solve the problem for you.
Thank you. I want to take it also from a man's viewpoint, and I am kind of reading a little more into the question. It sounds like it's come from a man. Sometimes, and some of this is cultural. For some men, and it's towards the end of the question it came up, you know, shouldn't he be deciding things? Some men feel because they are the men and head of the family, it means they have to decide on everything. Wrong. It is important to involve your wife in the decisions. And perhaps your wife is, like Vivian has described, is somebody who likes to be in the know rather than simply you dropping things on her. It does not, and there are some men also who consider the wife asking questions on certain actions that they want to take or certain decisions. There are some men who take it as the wife challenging their authority or disrespecting them. I think we ought to renew our minds of these things. You know, it is important. And some of us, perhaps we saw our fathers be, as the ones who were executing everything, and we didn't see our mothers actively involved in some certain decisions. So we think that our mothers never had a hand in these things. But I do remember, what an elderly woman said. He said, you have no idea what happens behind closed doors between a husband and wife. The fact that the mother doesn't say anything to counter what the father is saying when they're talking to the children, it doesn't mean they haven't discussed it behind closed doors. So, my brothers, let us encourage our wives' input rather than considering it as challenging our authority. It's not a matter of challenging authority. In any case, don't we say two heads are better than one? How many heads does the man have? One. How many heads does the wife have? One. If you bring them together, how many heads? Two. Two heads are better than one. Does she have a voice in the relationship? She ought to, because that's also how we build oneness. And that's how, my friend from Nepal, that's how your wife can be able to defend the decision that both of you take. It's when she has answers that she can also be part of, or even when you give an answer that brings out something she was thinking might not work, she can provide helpful input so you have a better decision. We do that with our male friends. Why not our wives? The ones who will be most affected by the decisions we take. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Just a comment here.
Yes, go ahead.
So I think that, thank you. I think that there's a possibility that the questions are asked because of probably lack of trust. And if that is the case, then one needs to go to the source of mistrust and deal with it, because otherwise it won't solve itself. Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Another question here, and it's coming from the US. It says, how do you deal with a situation where a religious leader's decision affects your relationship?
Who is in the relationship? That's the first thing. And who is listening to the religious leaders to the detriment of the relationship? I think we each, in the marriage, each of us as spouses need to assume responsibility for our own relationship rather than, and I'm going to use this word advisedly, rather than hide behind this religious leader said, my pastor, my imam, my guru, or sometimes not hiding behind, but wanting to have some other person be the authority in things that you do. That is a sure recipe for driving a couple apart. And if, as we have said, research proves it true, that our faith can help draw us closer together, why then would either spouse accept a religious leader directing them to take any action or decision that would weaken the oneness or that would betray the trust of the spouse? We have to be responsible for our own marriage rather than let somebody else dictate what should happen within the marriage. And I am not talking about when you have an issue and you need help and you are seeking help. But I'm talking about the question is driving at having somebody direct the other one or sometimes even both spouses how to behave within the relationship. And they themselves don't have a say in how they're relating to each other. That is dangerous. And that's why I say we each need to be responsible for our actions and decisions in our own marriages. It is very important. Yes, our religious leaders can guide us, but they are not the marriage. And if we want to have strong, I'm talking of strong marriages, not people who are breaking the marriage and you're having religious leaders trying to, or working with them or making attempts to repair the relationship. That's not, doesn't sound like the question is talking about that. But it's more like, things are being done that are more likely to tear the couple or push them apart than together. That's something we need to be very, very careful about. When you get married, or when we get married, any two people who get married, yes, they may be married by a religious leader, but they, the people, are the ones who get married. The religious leader doesn't get married to either of them. Let's think about that. Thank you.
And I think you can substitute family and friends in place of the religious leader, because sometimes people take advice from outside and they allow external influence to dictate what they do in the relationship. It's not all the advice that you get that is worthy of consideration. So you yourself, you have to evaluate. You have to evaluate what you've been told and determine whether it will improve your relationship or be a setback to what you want to accomplish. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Well, we almost run out of time, but let me ask this last question here. Is it healthy to promote individuality if we live apart, especially if we no longer do what we used to do when we first met?
Is it advisable to promote individuality when you are living apart?
Yes.
Is that the question?
Yes, especially if we were no longer together, if we were no longer doing the things that we used to do when we first met.
The issue is that whatever you do, you must have the end result to strengthen your relationship, to promote your oneness. Whether I am joining some association or picking up a hobby or something else because I'm living in another country or state or province, whatever you do as a spouse, you have to consider, like our wise contributor has emphasized a number of times, ask yourself, does this or will this promote oneness with my spouse? Will this promote the well-being of the marriage? You see, this kind of individuality being mentioned is sounding to me more like doing a boys or girls and happy hour kind of thing, having your own, developing a whole new lifestyle away from your spouse simply because you are not in the same place. You and I know it's dangerous, so I don't see why you are even asking me whether it's advisable. And maybe I should ask back, would you like it? Would you appreciate it? Would you value it if your spouse did the same thing? Obviously, you can see how sooner than later you will drift apart. So again, as our wise contributor has said, consider every decision, every action in light of how and whether it will promote oneness or the well-being of your marriage. Thank you very much. Dr. Sam, you said that was the last question, right?
Yes, that would be the last question.
So,
and then
there you are.
yes.
We say Remember, oneness doesn't happen by itself. It needs to be cultivated. And it involves two people. And more importantly, sometimes we need God's help to be able to do it right. And when we ask Him for wisdom, we can be sure He will answer and give to us. We can also draw help from counselors. We're talking good counselors, not people who will advise you to do things which ultimately will tear you apart rather than draw you closer together. God bless us all and watch over us till we meet again next week. Next month, pardon me. And also, special thanks to our contributor. We've had such wise contributions from you. Dr. Sam, if you don't mind, you can give your number again so he can text you his name and then we can thank him appropriately. So thank you all very much for contributing, and God willing, we'll be with you third Sunday of next month. Enjoy your marriages and strengthen and develop your relationships and love.
Richard,
Bye for now.
Before you go, we still want to ask if people will be touched to support our fundraising appeal. So I just want to remind everyone.
Dr. Sam,
yes.
You keep saying 500. I don't know why you have limited yourself to 500.
That is the baseline.
If you are raising funds, don't say 500. So make it free for people to be able to contribute as they can, you know.
Yes, sir.
Because if you say 500 and somebody can give you £1,000, should they deduct and send you only $500 equivalent?
Yes, that's
okay.
That's absolutely true. So we want to. So just for full disclosure and transparency, we run this program on a service provider that gives us access to reach thousands and thousands of people. I think our average number that listens to our show on a monthly basis is approximately 30,000 averagely. It's more, but averagely. And so today, for instance, we weren't able to reach them because our subscription expired. And so we want to...
Did you say 30 or 60?
60,000. I mean, 60. 60,000. And so this is a way by which this ministry reaches people across all the continents of the world. And I'm personally... it's a blessing because if Mr. and Mrs. Crab would charge us for this amount of work, I don't think we will have the resources to pay them. But they do this from their heart because it's a ministry to promote marriages across the globe. So if you are capable of supporting us with no cap on it, please 571-337-9185. It's our Cash App number or our Zelle number, and we will be gladly acknowledge you in our next program next month, God willing. On that note, I hand over back to Mr. Crab to wrap it up.
Can you give the number again a little more slowly?
Sure. It's going to be +1 571 337 9185.
Thank you, sir.
You're most welcome.
Thank you so much. Friends, as we've said, oneness involves both of us. Let us commit to developing oneness. We will be the major beneficiaries. We will enjoy it, and our lives will be the better and richer for it. Thank you so much. God bless you. Bye.
All right. God bless all of you. Bye, and have a blessed evening, morning, wherever you are in the world. God bless you. Bye-bye.
Amen.
Goodbye.